Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Presented by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of the Bible from leading experts in the field of archaeology.
Well, good day, folks. My name is Dr. George Sparks, and this is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. Today's special guest, is Dr. David Graves. And Dr. David Graves received his PhD from Aberdeen, Scotland. A native of Canada, has been involved in teaching Bible and archaeology for over 35 years. He retired assistant professor from Liberty University, Rawlings School of Divinity in Lynchburg, Virginia. He has also taught archaeology at Oxford University in England. He has provided tours at the Ashmolean as well as the British Museum, traveled extensively throughout the Middle East, and has been involved in the Mount Ararat Research Project, along with being a consultant with the National Geographic Productions. He has also been involved with Qumran, that's where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Temple Mount Sifting Project, as well as Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, in Israel, but also in Jordan at the Tel El Hammam excavation project, a candidate for Sodom and Gomorrah. In January 2017, Dr. Graves, along with the team, and I believe one was actually Dr. Randall Price, were excavating at the Dead Sea, looking at cave number 53 near Qumran in Israel, a suspected cave for holding the Dead Sea Scrolls. Also, David Graves, being my square supervisor at Tel El Hammam, discovered the ancient lost city of Livius, where he excavated an ancient Roman bath system, which we're going to go back and talk about probably within the next couple of weeks or so, with also another guest lecture. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So remember this, we're going to go back to Livius and look at the Roman baths, and then we have another site as well, both identifying in the New Testament and with one of Herod's sons. Dr. Graves, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you, George, as always.
And today we're going to talk about?
Looks like we're going to be talking about something about Egypt. Behind you there's beautiful displays of some of the sarcophagus. And we're going to talk about the pharaohs that are mentioned in the Bible. And we're going to start with mentioning a few of the pharaohs that aren't mentioned in the Bible, but how they relate. So that's our topic today, the pharaohs.
Great, because Egypt is always exciting. It's a very colorful culture, well involved in the biblical narrative. Matter of fact, we talked about I can't pronounce the word now. The Egyptian curse text, that's easier.
Extrication tablets.
There you go. And it was like a doll. And really briefly, since we're going to talk about Egypt, number one, the earliest name of the city of Jerusalem found on an archaeological item is Egyptian curse text.
Yes.
The early name of Yahweh, right? Can I say that? Yahweh, not being disrespectful, is also on a hieroglyph from Egypt. So we got two right there. Well, how about the name of Israel? Israel is also on what we call the Israel stela or the Meneptah stela, mentioned on Egyptian, because they hieroglyph. So all three big names for any type of individual into biblical archaeology or just reading the Bible: Jerusalem, Israel, and Yahweh, all being represented in Egyptian artifacts.
And we also have the name David on one as well.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, some big names are recognized.
We love to hate.
Yeah. So it's always good to go back to Egypt and visit and see what they have to offer archaeologically with relationship to our Bibles.
Right. And I better clear that up. The people we love to hate, that's the Egyptians. And isn't it an irony? It's the people that we shake our fist at that seems to be so cruel in the biblical narrative is where we get a lot of our validation of the scriptures, the scriptural narrative. If it went for the Egyptians and it wasn't for Herod, and then again Josephus, they give us a lot of information, and we like to go visit the sites as well.
Yeah.
So
what's behind me today is the Luxor Temple, Karnak Temple in Luxor. So when we were there, we were able to go around and visit, and we're going to be looking at one of the inscriptions from this temple today. So that's why I put that photograph up behind me. We're going to talk today about the Egyptian years. Now, this image that I put up here for my introduction plate is generated by AI. This is not an archaeological artifact, just for everyone to realize. But I thought it was kind of good. It kind of encapsulates all the ideas that we're going to talk about. The pharaohs in the Bible.
That's beautiful.
The material is taken from my book on the archaeology of biblical people. It's available at Amazon, and there are footnotes. So if you want to know, I bring the receipts, so they're at the bottom of every page, not at the back. You don't have to flip back to the end of the book to find them. All the good stuff, I call it. I design all of my books with footnotes. And chronologically, we're going to be talking about the different time periods in Egypt, the Egyptian chronology. And they are different than what we normally talk about when we talk about biblical archaeology. We move from the Stone Age or Chalcolithic period, copper, to the Iron Age, to the Bronze Age. Those are all different periods that we talk about. These are called dynasties. And there are three different dating systems that I've put up here. Ken Kitchen and David Roll, Grimmel as well. Nicholas Grimmel is another one. Just showing that there's different dating and time periods. Kitchen and Grimmel are pretty much the same. David Roll, who I know, he has tried to reshift everything and redate everything, and that just causes a lot of confusion. So I'm just going to call them dynasties, and that's what we're going to look at. There's a lot of controversy. There's no absolute dates, and we need to keep an open mind, and it does not impact biblical reliability, but the Bible is not dependent on our evidence. The Bible stands on its own. So, like I said, a lot of controversy with dating and things. But what's not controversial is that these pharaohs actually existed. The timeline we're talking about here is the time of Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, the intermediate period in Egyptian chronology. The question always comes up, who was the Exodus Pharaoh? Which one was it who was the Pharaoh during the Exodus? And there's generally three options: early, middle, and late dates. And depending on which date you take, you have a different Pharaoh. Here's the AI-generated versions of the pharaohs: Thutmose III and Ramses II. I just play around with AI a little bit, find it kind of fascinating. But I'm tied into the archaeology. So you have the early date, the middle date, and the late date. So the early date runs on the literal numbers. The people that follow that line of dating is generally Horeth, who's retired now from, I forget the university now he was at. It'll come to me in a minute. Randall Price, and then Dr. Bryant Wood. Dr. Stephen Collins takes the middle date, formulaic numbering, and then Kenneth Kitchen, Ailing, and Sparks take the late date. And those dates are there for you: 1500 to 1300 BC. There are the kings of the pharaohs of the opposition during that time period. And then you have the Exodus pharaohs here. We have Tutmosis the third, or Tutmosis the fourth, or Ramses the second. So depending on which dating you take, determines which pharaoh you take. And I have in my chart, I have some other comparisons here of the wilderness wandering as well as the conquest right here. So again, these are the different pharaohs that would have ruled during those time periods, depending upon which date you take. I tend to lean toward the early date, but my heart wouldn't be broken if it was the late date either. So I'm not hard and fast on my dating there. I think there's some good arguments that can be made from both sides. So pays your money and take your choice. So there they are. And these are the archaeological artifacts, not AI generated images. We have 5 pharaohs that are actually mentioned in the Bible. The thing with the pharaohs of the Exodus is that the pharaoh is actually not mentioned by name, so we don't know his actual name. However, there are a number of pharaohs who are named, giving us an historical anchor for the biblical narrative. Now, depending on who you are, Kenneth Kitchen, Krauss, or David Roll, the dates of these pharaohs would differ as well. So we have Shishak or Shishak, So or Azarkan, Tirhakah or Tirhakah, or Necho the second, and Hophra. And these are all mentioned, and there's the biblical accounts. We're going to look at each one of them. And I've gone through and I've reproduced their cartouche. This is their name in Hebrew. They have 2 round circles that have the first and last names. That's a bit of oversimplification. There's actually 5 different names that pharaohs had, Egyptians had. But here is the different cartouches that I've reproduced with the Egyptian hieroglyphs on them. We're going to look at a few of those. Now, so Shishak or Shishak the first, he lived in the 22nd dynasty, 945 to 924 BC. And there's what AI makes him look like. But we do have a few things from his reign. Now, this is the temple complex in Luxor. And the artifact we're going to look at is right there with that red circle. This is one of the walls. This is one of the earlier temples, the temple complex, what it was originally, and then they expanded it. You see the wall here on the outside with a larger complex. And here we have the sacred pool, the Luxor complex, a nice aerial shot of that. Here we have the plan of the complex, and the red arrow is what we're going to be talking about. The Temple of Ramses here, the Greater Court. All the different areas are all listed here in the numbers. So this is the Temple of Amun at Karnak in Luxor. So you have all the different notable areas that you can visit. So it was quite an elaborate complex. But just outside the wall, there was a wall here that had nothing on it. And of course, they always like to fill in the gaps and put their own pictures up. You know, you have room for a billboard. And that's what we're going to find. So this is the wall that we're going to look at, because we have something very interesting on it. This is a redrawing of it. This is the record of Shishak's invasion of Palestine in 925 BC. Shishak or Shishak, it's pronounced different ways because depending on where you're from, you know, tomato, they did the same thing, and they spelled these these words the way they were pronounced, because it's a vocal language. And so the scribe would write down what he heard. So depending on where you were from, Shishak, Shishunk, that's why you have different spellings of a lot of these names. You'll notice what we have here on the left side is the god Amun. And on the right side is the Pharaoh. And a lot of this has been destroyed and etched away, but we're able to rebuild it very easily because we know what the pharaohs portrayed themselves. You see him holding the hair here of his enemies. The god here has lines running from his hand, leading to each one of these cartouches. Well, actually, they're place names because he's got them under control. And here he has them by the hair. And the pharaoh here is in control. He's got a mace over his head. He's going to beat them. That's a common picture we find with the Egyptian pharaohs. So there's Amun. There's the place names that we have here in red. We're going to be talking about. There's a close-up of it, and Shishak is there, and he's etched out and destroyed because the pharaoh that came after him didn't want anything to do with the previous pharaoh. So they call in Latin, we have a name called Demetrio Memore, which means you destroy the memory of people in the past. And we see a lot of examples of this in the Egyptian record. They left the god, Amun, and right there is where we're going to be looking at those place names. He was a Libyan, so part of the Libyan dynasty. David Roll debates that. As with everything, there's always debate. Kitchen dates for Shishak, 945 to 924 BC. And Kenneth Kitchen is he's at the University of Liverpool in England. He's probably the world's #1 Egyptologist today. They call him the father of Egyptology. So he's my go-to person. His book on the reliability of the Old Testament is, well, I know that, George, you've got one on your shelf, and I have one on my shelf. It's a go-to book for this kind of stuff. Kitchen concludes, beyond rational doubt, these Egyptian data give us direct evidence that linked up with the events mentioned under Rehoboam in Kings and Chronicles. So it squarely places this individual at the right time, at the right place. The only king named Shishak who has the means and opportunity to invade the southern Levant, and for which there is a great deal of firm evidence that he is in fact did so, is Shishak I. So that's why they try to make a case, because the Bible uses one name and then the Egyptian record seems to use a different name. Well, the explanation, of course, is that they're speaking with a different accent and pronouncing it differently, Shishak and Shishak. I believe, and as many do, that they were the same individuals. There's a paper below that makes that case. The Old Testament mentions Shishak 7 times. He harbored Jeroboam in Egypt from Solomon when he escaped from under Solomon's rule in Kings and goes down. And then Shishak invades Israel and Judah, advances against Jerusalem. There are the 5 passages of Scripture, actually 6, that mention his name. He's mentioned 7 times because one has a duplicate in 2 Chronicles. And of course, as we know from reading our Bibles, Kings and Chronicles seem to repeat the same material, giving the odd item or part of it it's extra, that's found in one and not the other, but they complement one another. So that's exactly what we find here with 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 12:9 says, King Shishak of Egypt attacked Jerusalem and took away the treasures of the Lord's temple and of the royal palace. He took everything, including the gold shields that Solomon had made. So he's going to pay for his conquest, his military soldiers in some way. What better than to go and take the gold that's in the temple and melt it down and pay his troops. So that's what we find with the 22nd dynasty. Here is a reproduction of the name here, King of Judah. That's the cartouche right there, or place name. That's a name, not a cartouche. The Egyptians would make a cartouche like this and put a name of the pharaoh on it. But this is like a shield, and they put the name of the nations that they conquered on them when they invaded in 925 BC. So this is a triumphal relief that was commissioned. It names about 100 cities in Judah and Israel in these cartouches or name plates. And we don't know the names of all of them because they're written in Egyptian, but Jerusalem is missing from the list because of the damage, probably in this area, but they have scratched it out or has deteriorated because they didn't want it to be seen. Some suggest that these are should be translated the hand of the king, but these cartouches are names of places or people taken captive, not a hand of the king. So that translation really doesn't work for these because that's not their purpose. So that's a really good argument for why it shouldn't be translated as hand of the king. It should be translated as King of Judah. We have the name of the pharaoh mentioned in this seal, the scarab seal. I've redrawn it here. And then we have another scarab seal that was found by Petrie, Sir Flinders Petrie, when he was excavating in Egypt. And then we have the famous drawing of the fragment found at Megiddo in Israel, inscribed with the pronomen and the nomen cartouche of Pharaoh Shishak it's called the Shishak Victory Stele. And you'll notice the cartouche is the same here. You see the same, the feather, the waterway. You see the same elements. So this is the cartouche of the king. And then the left side is reproduced here with the Egyptian hieroglyphs. So when you compare them all, this is the name of the pharaoh, how you would read it in Egyptian. The other guy is So, or Arzakon V. He's the last pharaoh of the 22nd dynasty, 730 to 715 BC. How AI would produce it. Here's the 2 Kings is where he's mentioned. For he had sent, the king of Assyria found treachery in Hosea or Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt. So this event is mentioned here. Therefore, the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. He's the final pharaoh. He's a Libyan as well. Hoshea had reestablished his vassal status with Shalmaneser V, but later reneged and courted Pharaoh So of Egypt instead, bringing the wrath of the Assyrian king. Shalmaneser imprisoned Hoshea and besieged the capital of Samaria. So again, they're talking about their conquests. And here we have an artifact that has the name of Osicron the fourth on it. Here's the passage in 2 Kings that talks about it. I already mentioned part of that, but that's the full text. So is mentioned twice, or Osicron. The next one mentioned in the Bible is Tirhakah. He's the third pharaoh of the 25th dynasty, 690 to 664 BC. And he's mentioned in scripture as well. AI representation of him as well. So it's Tirhakah or Tirhakah, or Tirhakah. There's this cartouche here on the right in red, which gives his name. There's one of the photographs of him that we have from the Carmen Museum in Sudan. He's one of the Kushite. So he's a Nubian ruler of Egypt and Kush. So they have different rulers from different areas. Some come from Libya, some come from Nubia or Kushites. So these folks are darker in color because they're Nubians. And that's why you have these pharaohs looking a bit darker, some of them. 25th dynasty, the unified kingdom. He unifies the north and the south. He places the capital at Memphis. The biblical context of Hezekiah, king of Judah, troubled by the Assyrians under Sennacherib, who was defeated at Eltika in 701 BC. Here's the passage that mentions him. He's mentioned in 2 Kings as well as in Isaiah. Isaiah says the king heard that King Tirhakah of Ethiopia, that's where he's Nubian, was marching out to fight him. He again sent messengers to Hezekiah, ordering them, and then that gives the passage. So King Tirhakah of Ethiopia, because that's where they're ruling from. Necho II is the second king of the 26th dynasty, 610 to 595 BC. There's his cartouche in the bottom left, and what the AI makes him look out to be. Again, it did a pretty good job. I made him darker, which is consistent because he's from that time period. 2 Chronicles 35:20 says, after all this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish by Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him. So records the battle that they had. And there's the cartouche underneath King Necho. And so King Josiah of Judah is the Assyrian vassal. He tries to head off the Egyptians by intercepting Necho on the plains of Megiddo on his way to Carchemish. And King Josiah lost his life on the way. There's the cartouche right there in the upper right-hand corner. The people sent his son Jehoahaz II as their king. After 3 months, Necho removes Jehoahaz and imposes a heavy tribute on Judah. And Necho then places Josiah's eldest son, Jehoiakim, on the throne. And Josiah's son, Jehoahaz, was taken to Egypt, never to be heard from again. So these pharaohs played a fairly significant role in their relationship with Israel and Judah. And Jeremiah warns that their king would never return. So this is a prophecy that Jeremiah fulfills. There are all the passages in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles and Jeremiah that make reference to Pharaoh Necho. The last one we're going to look at is Hophra, a priest, the fourth king in the 26th dynasty, 589 to 570. What he would look like, there is one of the a sphinx of a priest, Luxor Museum, basalt head of him in the Louvre. He's the contemporary of King Hezekiah of Judah. When Nebuchadnezzar invades Jerusalem in 588, King Zedekiah requested him from the Egyptians. He wants help from the Egyptians. So go to your friends, go to your neighbors. Hophra sent troops that temporarily eased the assault of Nebuchadnezzar was making on Jerusalem. And there's the passage in Jeremiah 44. People are always talking about where's the evidence for the pharaohs? Well, we already talked about a little bit of that with the places up in the north, in the Delta region. Okay, George, any comments?
It's always interesting because, like you said, named 5 pharaohs. Usually when we talk about pharaohs, it's always going to be the pharaohs of the Exodus, right? Which one is it, the early date or the late date? We never really hear too much about all these other pharaohs that had a good impact on the land of Judea and Samaria, but we just don't pay attention. They're kind of like in the shadow of the Pharaoh of the Exodus.
And they're specifically mentioned in the text. That's what's so important, I think. It's so interesting for me. They're mentioned in the text, and they're supported by the archaeological record, and they fit, perfectly synchronize with the biblical narrative of what's taking place and happening in those different periods in Israel's history and Judah's history.
Right. I just found it interesting that Josiah was the king of Reformation, and his prophet would have been Jeremiah, and yet he went out to battle. And it's kind of confusing because he was battling the Babylonians, and then he's forming an alliance. But the thing is that I think in the biblical text, Necho says, we're not even at war. He says, he goes, why are you here? Kind of a conversation. And as a result, I guess Josiah actually got killed by a stray arrow.
Yeah.
Something like that. So
well, they're always flip-flopping with their alliances. So they go from, the Egyptians to the Assyrians. They figure who's the strongest, who's going to be the best ones to protect us. And so that's why they're always going back and forth all the time. And the thing to realize with your geography is that, you have Assyria and you have Babylon up on the northeast, and then you have Egypt down in the southwest, and you have Israel right in the middle. So Israel and Judah are getting it both ways all the time. When the Assyrians want to invade Egypt, they've got to come through Israel. When the Egyptians want to go and fight against the Assyrians, they've got to go through Israel again. So they get caught in the crossfire. And so that's why you find all of this interesting dilemmas that these kings of Israel and Judah get caught in. They just want to live in peace, but
right, they're living on a land bridge, bridge, because for them to cross, they're going to use the Levant in what they might call Roman period, the Via Maris, and then it was the Trunk Road, and if we go south, it's called the Way of Horus. So it's got different names. I think in the Bible, scholars talk about this because it mentions don't go by the way of the Pharisees, right? And but really, they're talking about that same trade route. And it's always very desirable to control it. And whoever controls it becomes wealthy because they're collecting taxes and revenue.
Yeah.
And some actually suspect this might be one business move for Solomon.
Yep.
He controls Hatzor, Megiddo, and Gezer, Kish, of course, Jerusalem, everything along the trade route he's controlling. Of course, Gezer, supposedly, I guess, in the biblical text, is given to Solomon by a king, the Egyptian.
And the King's Highway up on the Jordanian plateau. He controls that coming up and down. And we believe actually that Tel El Hammam was one of Solomon's storehouses. We're finding so many silos there in the last season in the Iron time period. And we know there's an administrative center for Solomon. So he's controlling the trade route coming up and down the King's Highway and then going across up to Jerusalem, across the Jordan. So he's got that all under wraps and making money off it. He's got the toll booth put up.
That's one way to explain it for people understanding why it's so important to control the what we might say today the land of Israel along the trade routes, because it's the way you trade. If you're not going to use the water, then you got to use the trade route, and it is very fascinating.
Yeah.
And of course Josiah is basically it's the end of the temple, the siege around 586. So it's a fascinating time period, and it seems like Jeremiah is there to record it. And then later on, is it Jeremiah that fled to Elephante? I forget exactly what happened, but it's all a fascinating, because then you got Josiah's sons that get confused. You got Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, got all these guys, and it's one right after another, because I guess if one doesn't work out, they get another one and put him in, and it can happen in a succession.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes, the Egyptians want to put up a king under their control, a puppet king. So they would say, you're going to be loyal to me, going to give me some money, some gold. I'll put you in charge and you can rule the country, but you got to pay me my tribute every year and my taxes, and not a lot different than what we find actually in overseas right now in certain countries where we have puppet kings being put in place by other countries. So, well, we'll leave it there for the political stuff, but it's very similar, and we see it mirrored.
Yeah, and the alliances, and you see the alliances, and then you find out who's for who, and then you think, well, why'd they do that? So it is complex.
Yeah,
it is
we always say follow the money, follow the gold. Follow the gold. Solomon, he's wanting to. He needs the gold to pay for his troops and his armies, and the Egyptians need gold to do the same for theirs. The Egyptians had a lot of gold, probably being mined in North Africa area, but that was the money of trade and the money of being able to support your troops. So the same thing goes for today. I say follow the money, and you're going to find out who's in control.
Now, I don't know this. Did they have the mummy in the sarcophagus of Shishak?
I don't know, to be honest.
Because you mentioned Noob, and the Egyptian word for gold is Noob. So it comes from Nubia.
Yeah.
That's where they got a lot of their gold.
The Nubians.
But I forget who says it. Maybe it was Josephus. That gold was so plentiful in Egypt, that actually silver was much rare.
And it was,
at least in the Bronze Age.
And it was more valuable than gold in the.
It's more valuable than gold, yes. So it's a time where we don't think of it, where silver was much more valuable than gold in Egypt. And I'm not sure if it was Shishak's coffin that was made out of silver, because there's a couple pharaohs, at least one I know of, whose coffin was made out of silver instead of gold.
Well, that's good homework for our listeners.
Yeah, so that's very true. People, come on, you got to join in on this, and it's fairly easy. So I'm not going to do it now, but we could just Google it and find out which pharaohs had silver coffins. And I think we're very close to, I'm not mistaken, Shishak or Shishak, and the city would be Tanis. But in the Bible, don't look for Tanis. What's it called in Psalms? Psalms, it's not Tanis. Zoan. In Psalms, it's referred to as Zoan, but it's referring to the Egyptian city as Tanis. which is very popular because of the
Indiana Jones.
Because you follow that early narrative that Dr. Graves is talking about. He's a Pharaoh that had laid siege to Jerusalem and took the treasure. Where did he take the treasure? And was the ark in that treasure? And if he did, where would he have taken it? And remember, in the beginning of that movie, they get out this great big dusty Bible and open it up, and they show the ark, and it kind of starts with, the scriptural narrative, and then it goes into archaeology. It is kind of fascinating the way it draws you in, because there is an element of truth that Shishak did this, and the temple treasure went somewhere. Was the ark involved? That's probably one of the guessworks about who took the ark. And some would say it was Shishak. Where did he take it? And some would say Tanis. You look up Tanis in the Bible, it's not there. It's kind of puzzling because it's referred to as Zoan. Yeah, I think in the Psalms.
And you have the tradition as well that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So, but when you look at the text and you understand what they have to do with the gold, they have to pay their armies. It was probably melted down and used to pay for all of the armies that and all the exploits that the pharaohs were working on. So that's likely where it has gone. That's speculation on my part, but I think it's a reasonable speculation based on the biblical text and what we know from archaeology and in history. So lots of fun.
It's worthy of a really good movie, like Raiders of the Ark.
Yeah.
But
I've been to Tanis as well, up there in the northern Delta region.
What's it like?
It's fascinating. It's different. It's a bit eerie, and a lot of statues around, stelae, reliefs, quite desolate. So a good place for the movie to be filmed, and certainly the spot to go. But yeah, really, really neat to be there.
So I'll have to look that up because it's been so long. In the discussion, it just brings back memories like 14 years ago of Zoan and Tanis. And I'm not sure, but the Plusiac branch of the Nile, where we find Ramses, the land, and the Pharaoh, and you showed us a little archaeological remains from B Talk's drawings. I think it was last episode.
Yeah.
But and not to get off subject, I don't want to confuse people, but what happened is when the Pelusiac branch of the Nile dried up, they moved a lot of the statues of Ramses. Now, I believe it was to Tanis. I believe they moved the statues to Tanis. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, they moved them. I know I've got photographs of them moving it. There's only 2 branches of the Nile that still exist today. The rest have dried up. But I'm not sure where they took those remains, but they reconstructed the entire monument in a different location. I think it's Tanis, or near Tanis. I'm not sure. Yeah, another project to our listeners to explore.
It is interesting because when they moved the statues of Ramses to Tanis, I think later what we might see as I don't want to get into it's too confusing. It confused some people that was the location of Ramses instead of close to Avaris. Make sense? That's what I'm just going to leave off there before I get into too much depth in this. Is that when the Plusiac branch dried up, you have all these really cool statues of Ramses. What are you going to do with it? Just leave it there? No, they take it and they move it up to Tanis, and because of the statues with the hieroglyph of the name Ramses, they supposed, like that was Ramses, and they were mistaken. But that would be a good guess. Those are where the statues are. Why not? But
Yeah.
Anyway, interesting program of the pharaohs mentioned in the Bible that we have dates for, but we like to debate and argue about the pharaohs that are not mentioned and that we don't have dates for.
Yeah. And we don't have their names.
Yeah, we don't know their names. For sure, we don't really know their names. It's not mentioned in the Bible. And we don't really know the dates because if one pharaoh will bring it to one of the other dates,
Yeah.
unless you just don't believe in the Exodus, you don't have to worry about it. But that's,
Yeah. Yeah.
I know right now I got people going back, George, back. I was just kidding, folks. I just want to throw that out there. But we do have that. We have early date. Then we got. I think Steve Collins is a bit of a maverick. He has Thutmose the fourth, right?
Yeah.
Make sure
Yeah.
you got the right fingers for that one. One, two, three, fourth. Uh, I I think that's unique to Trinity Southwest University, and he uses a variety of different texts. I think it was the early dates, the late dates mentioned in Galatians, and that's all that becomes very fascinating. So it's a study within itself.
Yeah.
That if you get on the web and start to look it up, by the time you're done, you're going to be into your ibuprofen and Tylenol, and probably need a good shrink to help you with this. It's very true.
And a glass of wine.
A good glass of wine. Just forget the glass. Let's get the bottle. Just put it right there because this is
You
going
got
to take a
the
while.
you got the Hyksos mixed in there as well in that time period, so that helps to mess things up. And so yeah, it's a complicated trying to unravel the early and the late date. But I lean toward an early date, but they make good, as I said, good arguments for some of the late date stuff too. So trying to sort that all out. I'm not an Egyptologist, don't claim to be, so I
Your
put that
boy,
on my
your
back
boy.
burner.
Okay, well here we go. That I'm gonna. Okay, you said your early date, right?
Well, I lean in that direction.
Okay, but you're on this side of the screen too, for me. So that side is early date. This side is late. But anyway, okay, you said you lean towards that, but you said your Egyptologist, your boy, your reliability of the Old Testament is Kenneth Kitchen. Was Kenneth Kitchen dated to?
A late date.
See, it's a mess.
That's like I said. I get my bottle of Tylenol out when I try and sort through all of that. Um, the one thing I'm certain of is that it happened, and that a pharaoh was involved in it. And one day I'm going to find out who that pharaoh was. In the meantime, we have the names of other pharaohs that we know for certain, and those are the five that I can put a peg in the wall and say that's exactly where they are, and it fits exactly where the Bible says they should be, and then that helps just sort out all the details of Kings and Chronicles, the late Bronze period.
Once again, folks, now this probably be difficult to show because I got my screen up in the background, but here's a number of your books. This is New Testament archaeology. This is Old Testament archaeology. Here's the New Testament archaeology, which you can receive a lot of this information in your books, which I recommend people going out there and getting. And then you have your new one that just came out, which I don't have yet. And so I imagine people need to go online.
The history of the newest one is the history of biblical archaeology, and
right.
it tells the story, the background of the stories of the human individuals, the archaeologists themselves, and what they did, and how they discovered things, and fascinating stories. We've got all kinds of things in there. We got a love story in there with Agatha Christie. We've got Max Mallowan. We got espionage with T.E. Lawrence, and we've got a murder with one of the Irish archaeologists. We've got they're diplomats. So all kinds of fascinating, good stuff in the book. So it's a pretty good read. I think folks will enjoy it.
That is fun stuff when you get into, you could say the behind the scenes. I was reading this well, I'm a junkie, so I was reading about some archaeology and the different archaeologists. And it was a little bit about the archaeologist history, not necessarily the archaeology in itself, like what you're talking about. And it was referring to Kathleen Kenyon and some of the people she was associated with when she was getting started in the field. And there was a note, I guess, sent to her from Albright. And it was kind of interesting, kind of funny. And he was suggesting, unless you're very well funded, to keep, because she was a female archaeologist, and he was in this article, he was actually saying that females do make really good archaeologists. And I don't know what brought it up, but in his letter, his article, what have you, it mentioned, but it makes for what do you want to say? An interesting archaeology, more difficult type of archaeology when you have both men and women working at the dig together. And he said, well, basically, he was saying no different than any other human endeavor. Let's say it might have been the night air, but he was kind of warning Catholic Kenyon, if she does this, make sure she's, she keeps the folks separated in some fashion. In other words, have women work on one crew by themselves, have men work on one crew by themselves. I thought it was rather, I found it funny,
Probably a fact that our listeners don't realize as well as that Sir Flinders Petrie, who worked in Egypt for many, many years, was an eccentric kind of individual. He lived in a cave for a long time, for a number of years, when he was excavating there. And then Petrie donated his brain to the London Museum, and it went missing. So a lot of fascinating stories like that are in the book on the history of biblical archaeology that folks will find interesting. But anyway, just a little side note, a little bit of trivia, taking us back to Egypt and our research.
Get your book.
Yeah. So
because it's going to be, some drama and some whatnot going on in there.
Yeah.
Come on. Did you include yourself?
No, I've got a photo of me and with some notable archaeologists. I've got a photo of Dr. Scott Stripling. And
dig, right? You met your wife at a dig, right?
Yep.
You and your see, I think Albright was talking about people like you, man.
Yeah, my wife and I, we dug together. She was one of the, I said she was one of the best movers of soil that we had, of dirt. She could sure move the dirt. She could fill those goofers up faster than our staff could take them out of the square. So
That's
she was
hilarious.
good. Yeah, good memories.
So, but Petrie, wow. Yeah, see, that people need to get the book just to read about how fascinating these people are and how they can be eccentric, and the behind the scenes can be just as kind of like interesting and fascinating and funny.
In those early years, they loaded up a boat with a whole lot of these great big monuments to take them back to the British Museum, and the boat sank in the Nile River. So here we have all of these amazing monumental, and they still haven't recovered them all, sunk in the Nile River, taking them back to the British Museum. So that story is in there too. Anyway, there's a lot of photographs. There's color photographs of every archaeologist, all the black and white photographs. I colorized them, so it's in full color. And it's a good fun read. And it'll give you the background behind what these old guys and girls did.
Right.
Digging. There was some fascinating female archaeologists, like Gertrude Bell and Agatha Christie, and so
Christie.
yeah, a lot of them, and I've got them highlighted in my book too. So get the book, read about the background of it if you want to know what's going on behind the scenes, and how one of them got murdered.
That's right. Was it McAllister? Did he get murdered?
I'm trying to find his name in the back of my mind. I can see him with his shorts on. He was digging in Jordan.
Oh, damn. Okay, maybe not that.
Anyway, so you get the book and you'll find that out.
There you go. You know, years ago, not just kind of like, I was in Israel, and it's a cool story. But anyway, a guy took me into a cemetery. I think it's the Armenian cemetery. Armenian. It's really close to the tomb of David in the upper room, that location. Outside, I believe there's a gate, and you got the Domitian Abbey. That's very close. And then there's a cemetery there. I think it's the Armenian cemetery. That's where Petrie is buried, but not all of them.
Starkey, that's his name. Starkey comes to mind now.
That's right. Yeah.
Comes to mind now. I just had, I forget things. That's why I've written my books, so I can have everything. I can consult my own books when I forget.
There you go. But yeah, Starkey. All these names. But if you want to know the archaeology, you want to know the individuals, you got to start. How far do you go back in your book?
Oh, I go back to the beginning. I have my first chapters on the beginning of biblical archaeology with the establishment of the British Museum and the Louvre, back to Napoleon and the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. And it's actually part of a class I taught on the history of British biblical archaeology at Oxford University many, many years ago. And I expanded it to just include everything and everyone. And I take it right back from Napoleon all the way through to, I have the last chapter on notable, and it deals with everyone who has died. I don't deal with any living, except if I mention some of the notable individuals in one of the final chapters where they've dug, but I don't have their photographs, and I just have some general information about them. But the full story about where they dug, what they found, sort of the background information, and the fun stuff that people like to, instead of just the dry bones. And there's photographs of their artifacts they discovered, and Henry Layard, Rawlinson. Oh, there's a fascinating story about what they did with the Behistun inscription, and how they did a contest to see which of these was going to be, who could figure out and translate the cuneiform. So fascinating story. It was actually a minister of a church who won the contest. He had the best translation over Rawlinson. So again, all those stories are in there, and
okay,
full of good stuff.
When I hang up, I'm gonna have to look the book up and order it.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. Well, anyway, we got to get going. We got a full day, and I'm sure you got things on your agenda. Great picture behind you. I was trying to make sure I could trumpet somehow, because I think what's always on my mind. I wonder what Dave has got for a slide, but that's cool. And
well, mummies and Karnak.
In Egypt. Right. All right, David. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and I'll hope to see you next week. All right.
As always, good chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
God bless.